I was chatting about that in my talk, and I think some of the commonalities that we see, and it's always when we're in the Industrial Revolution, we think it's the first time we're sort of seeing these things. But if you look across all of them, they always started with a lot of fear, and then we started adopting the changes, and then the changes started accelerating. And the less fear there was, the more we kind of accelerate. And that's sort of one of the things that we've seen across all of the revolutions. The second was that we used each revolution to do things that humans initially thought they were better at doing, but machines could actually do much better. But finally, for me, what was most interesting about all the revolutions, in particular the Fourth Industrial Revolution, and why we could have a positive spin on it, is that with each revolution, it replaced certain tasks, or machines replaced certain tasks that humans had to do. And that allowed us to actually refocus ourselves and find what we were actually better at doing. And until, of course, the next revolution comes, then you've got to find something else that you're better at doing. So I look at it as that kind of continuum, and it's not the first time we're in this position. I definitely don't think there's ever going to be a day where we say Fourth Industrial Revolution has arrived everywhere. I think different regions of the world will experience it differently. Different industries will experience it at different paces. Rural versus urban areas will see different things. And it would be foolish to say that it's all sort of going to happen at once. I think it's going to be quite a while still. And the Fourth Industrial Revolution and all these things around artificial intelligence are themselves evolving and developing over time. So it's hard to say which version of artificial intelligence will be prevalent and present in all the marketplaces. So I think we still have some time, but not a lot of time. We still need to prepare and adjust for the time when it is more prevalent, but it's not all of a sudden, definitely not. Sure, I think it's important to understand what machines will be able to do with the Fourth Industrial Revolution, but the other side of the equation is also important. How are people going to be able to respond to it? How are we going to be able to capacitate and educate people to be able to contribute and be positive agents in the Fourth Industrial Revolution? And I think that's a very important question to answer, because if we don't, then Africa is going to sort of fall further behind. And really what I was talking about is that we need to be able to develop people with different kinds of attributes that are going to be able to use to survive the Fourth Industrial Revolution. Instead of the left brain dominance, the analytical thinking that has dominated a lot of our educational systems, we need to create a different kind of person. A person who, as Dan Pink said in his book, works from a whole brain concept, or uses a growth mindset, or has unique human selling points like strong communication skills, social skills, personal skills for self-leadership, problem-solving skills, those kind of learning and adapting skills where you can find yourself in a new context and still be able to respond adequately. Those are the things that are sort of uniquely human, and we're not adjusting our training programs, our education systems to be able to create that kind of person who will thrive in the Fourth Industrial Revolution. And we haven't been exploring enough about how we do that. I don't think we understand it ourselves. And there are a lot of new alternative frameworks about how development programs should be structured to be able to develop people with those kind of attributes. And I talked about one in particular by a local entrepreneur and a Ashoka fellow called Vivian Schultz, called the A to B transformation model, that essentially in a very simple and practical way captures very complex neurobehavioral concepts about how you develop people, or ordinary people, into those response-able, essentially is the word I was using, people who can respond to their environment and be able to be contributors or self-sufficient net contributors in this environment. And we need to be exploring that. Companies need to be exploring that, not just NGOs, not just social entrepreneurs, because there's a business imperative to be able to develop people that can participate fully in this industrial revolution. The insurance industry employs a great deal of people, and I think that it has to ask itself a number of questions about how do we ensure that all the people in the sort of industry can continue to add value when machines have automated a lot of the functions. And this brings us back to how do we tap into skills and attributes that are more human, that machines haven't sort of come to yet, and those are the attributes that we need to develop if we're going to be able to distinguish ourselves. And again, it's much like what happened with other revolutions. We forced to to focus on what makes us more human and more unique, and eventually machines catch up to that and we have to find another level. I mean, we're at that place now, and those kind of skills that people are going to be able to need now are around flexibility and the ability to be able to respond to tasks and challenges in a way that addresses the issues at hand. And that responsiveness, essentially, or that ability to respond adequately, is what I was speaking to earlier about how we develop people better. It speaks to how we develop whole brain function, how we develop growth mindsets, so that people are in a better position to respond to tasks and challenges around them. And the insurance industry sort of should be leading the charge around how do we create these new models and frameworks and how to develop people at scale so that they are not sort of dormant recipients of what is happening, but can actually be active contributors. And as an industry, there's a huge question about how we answer that, because obviously we don't want to lose all of those jobs. I think it's important to realize that there's actually people that have been exploring this question for a long time already. We've just been so used to traditional training programs, our schooling systems as they are, and we haven't taken a step back to realize actually those school systems were developing largely a left brain function, and those are the functions that machines are now taking over, the analytical, repetitive, mundane sort of tasks. And there are people that have been looking at how we develop fuller human beings or more response-able human beings, and we don't need to start from scratch. These concepts must now just become more mainstream. And like I mentioned, simply applying methodologies like the ATB transformation model that I've mentioned could help companies. For example, they've used it in social enterprises, a particular one called the Clothing Bank that helps recruit and empower young women who are unemployed to help them start their own businesses in retail, clothing and the like. And before they used these more sophisticated models on how you develop people, they struggled to get people through the training programs and to successfully run those businesses. They initially thought that obviously if a mom has 4 months mouths to feed, she'll be under enough pressure to do it, but they still had low sort of throughput rates until they started applying these methodologies that builds an internal locus of control, growth mindsets, whole brain function. And they were able to even assess people for whether they have an internal or external locus of control. Do they believe that they can affect and make a change in their lives, or do they believe that life kind of happens to them? And just by being able to select people that are already predisposed to having an internal locus of control, they could actually recruit people that could manage to get through the whole training program as well as run their businesses successfully. And using the methodologies of the framework, that training program now reflects a deeper understanding about how to develop the human psyche and the mind, what kind of stimulus and considered tasks and challenges are required in a training process to be able to develop people into that whole brain function and growth mindset that we want. So these tools are there, and this is just one example, and there must be sort of more. We just need to be prepared to take a step back away from what we're used to doing and look at those alternative approaches. So Rekindle Learning is a business I started a few years ago, and I believe education and skills is one of the levers that we need to pull to be able to change the trajectory of Africa's development. And what we essentially do is that we marry the best that we know around learning science and how the brain works with smart technology. And instead of just putting a PDF file or a PowerPoint presentation online and calling it e-learning, we actually apply more sophisticated learning methodologies onto it. So for example, we'll use the concept of micro-learning, which says instead of giving someone a 300-page manual or doing a 3-day workshop and hoping against all hope that they actually remember something, you repackage that content into small bite-sized learning chunks that are interactive, that allow you to track how one's understanding is at and be able to adapt and focus on someone's weak areas and support them through the learning until they actually demonstrate that they have retained the knowledge. And we've seen very good rates of improvement of people learning who would have initially failed exams where they only had textbooks but now can pass them using this micro-learning approach, because it provides a great deal more support, particularly if someone comes from a poor learning background. And in universities we do a similar thing specifically around English literacy. Our platform there, English Word Power, essentially empowers first-year students or pre-degree students to improve their English proficiency skills, particularly if they come from a poorer school, and bridge that gap so that they can actually achieve the level of English that they need to be able to perform at a tertiary level. And we believe, this is addressing one of the major tenets of the fees must fall movement, which is trying to make a tertiary tertiary education more inclusive. So really, yeah, marrying smart learning tech with learning science to achieve better learning outcomes.